Child labor in India. India is home to the largest child population in the world. Child labor, as defined by the International Labour Organization, refers to the work done by the child that leads to the deprivation of one's childhood and educational opportunities. The effects of such work could include loss of potential and dignity in self, and which is harmful to the child's physical and mental development. The definition of child as given under the Child Labour Prohibition and Regulation Act of 1986 is child means a person who hasn't completed his 14 years of age. The Union Cabinet recently has approved a proposal for amending the Act to ban employment of children aged up to 14 in any form of industry. It will be an offence to employ such children not only in factories or industries but also in homes or farms, and if their labor is meant to serve any commercial interest. Another amendment is to define those children aged 14 to 18 years as adolescents, and it prohibits their employment in mines, explosive industries, chemical and paint industries, and other hazardous establishments. The government decision is in line with the Convention of the International Labour Organization, that is ILO, which prohibits any form of child labor until the age of 14. The persistence of child labor is due to the inefficiency of the law, administrative system, and also because it benefits employers who can reduce general wage levels. Various growing concerns have pushed the children out of school and into employment, such as forced displacement due to development projects such as dam construction, or, for example, Narmada and Tehri project, loss of jobs of parents due to economic slowdown, farmers' suicide, armed conflicts, high costs of healthcare, etc. Girl child is often used in domestic labor within her own family. Then there is a lack of political will to outlaw such child labor. Now let us see what are the activities that are recognized as child labor. First of all, child labor is that one which mentally, physically, socially or morally dangerous and harmful to the children, and it interferes with their schooling. And this interference is by depriving them of opportunity to attend school, obliging them to leave school prematurely, or requiring them to attempt to combine school attendance with excessively long and heavy work. Now let us see what are the laws related to the child labor in India, what are the specific articles that are related to child labor in India. Now Article 14, first and foremost, very important. It says no child below the age of 14 years shall be employed to work in any factory or mine or engaged in any other dangerous employment. Then comes the Article 39E. It states the state shall direct its policy towards securing that the health and strength of workers, men and women, and the tender age of children are not abused, and that they are not forced by economic necessity to enter vocations which are unsuitable to their area and strength. The other article, third article, is Article 39F, which states that the children shall be given opportunities and facilities to develop in a healthy manner and in conditions of freedom, dignity, and that childhood and youth shall be protected against moral and material abandonment. Then number 4, Article 45, which states that the state shall endeavour to provide within a period of 10 years from the commencement of the Constitution for free compulsory education for all children until they complete the age of 14 years. Now it is to be noted that the main legislative measures at the national level are the Child Labour Prohibition and Regulation Act of 1986 and also the Factories Act of 1948. Now let us get into the causes of child labor in India. One basic thing that strikes to everybody is the poverty. Poverty can be termed as the main reason for child labor in India. Though the country has achieved commendable progress in industrialization, the benefits of same have not been passed on to the lower strata of the society. In order to keep costs down, even large companies employ unorganized workers through contractors who get uneducated, unskilled and semi-skilled people at a very low ages. Now, this helps the industries to keep their labor cost down at the cost of poor laborers. In effect, what happens is the children of these poor unorganized laborers find some work to help run the family. They cannot afford to go to the school when they do not have food to eat and when their other brethren go hungry. And child from such deprived families try to work as domestic servants or in factories that employ them and remain uneducated and grow up that way, becoming perennial victims of this vicious cycle of poverty and suppression. Another important factor is the lack of jobs and resultant high competition for jobs. The industrialists in India have been successful in taking advantage of this situation. This is a disadvantage faced by the job seekers, and due to high population, the job seekers are not in a position to bargain at higher wage. As a result, the poor remain poor, working for low wages. Fundamental to all such problems are the illiteracy and lack of education, which is one of the main causes for the child labor. Illiteracy and lack of education. Illiteracy is a situation when a person is not able to read or write. This is when the person is not in a position to get even primary education. Lack of education is another aspect which is a result of literacy and lack of information. An uneducated person is one who is generally unaware of such things which an average person is required to know. Such people are normally unaware of their human rights and the rights of children too. These children of such people normally become child laborers around their homes. One of the major factors or a cause for a child labor is the attitude of employers, the irresponsible attitude of employers. A general sense of irresponsibility towards society is seen among the employers in India. They are least bothered as to how their employees survive, in spite of being aware of the high cost of living and inflation. They are least bothered and least ashamed to pay wages which are much below sustenance levels. Also, if the employers were responsible, they in the first place would not employ children at all. Now there are many situations in various areas in which children are forced to engage in work. For example, in agriculture. In agriculture, children working long hours and under severe hardship on the fields. They are also exposed to hazardous working with modern machinery and chemicals. The hazardous industries and occupations would include such industries like glassmaking, mining, construction, carpet weaving, zeri making, fireworks and others as listed under the child labor. There are also small industrial workshops and service establishments on the streets like rag pickers, porters, vendors, etc. Domestic work is another important area where largely invisible and silent, and the children here face a higher degree of exploitation and abuse in the home of employers. Now let us see what are the steps taken for eradication of child labor at various levels. One of the main things that is being attempted is the prevention. According to the Child Labor Prohibition and Regulation Act, children of any age may be employed provided employers adhere to restrictions including a maximum of 6 hours of workday with a 1 hour rest period and at least 1 day off per week and no night or overtime work at all. The Child Labor Prohibition and Regulation Act bars children from age 14 to 18 from being employed in hazardous occupations and under 65 hazardous listed processes such as handling pesticides, weaving carpets, breaking stones, in mines and domestic service. The Factory Act also bars children under the age of 14 from working in factories. Employing children under the age 14 in a hazardous occupation or processes can lead to fines and imprisonment. Additionally, the government must either compensate the family of the child or find employment for an adult member of the family. Now, in this connection, the state governments also have the authority to pass a legislation establishing a minimum age for work. In 2012, the state of Rajasthan passed a legislation establishing a legal minimum working age of 18 years. However, gaps remain in legal protections for working children. The lack of national minimum age for employment increases the likelihood that very young children may engage in activities that jeopardize their health and safety. The Juvenile Justice Care and Protection of Children Act prohibits employers from exploiting a juvenile employees under the age of 18 through practices such as keeping them in bonded condition or garnishing their wages, and violators may be fined or imprisoned for this. The Bonded Labor System Abolition Act outlaws bonded labor in India, and it provides for a district-level vigilance committee to investigate allegations of bonded labor and release anyone found in bondage. The Act also provides for rehabilitation assistance, payment for the released bonded laborers, and persons found using bonded labor may be fined or face imprisonment. In April 2013, the Criminal Law Amendment Act was passed, and it amended the Indian Penal Code to protect the children and adults from being trafficked, and it included forced labor situations. Penalties for such acts include fines and up to lifetime imprisonment. Then there is Protection of Children from Sexual Offence Act, which was passed in 2012. This law protects children from sexual assault, sexual harassment, and pornography, and it establishes special courts for trials of these crimes. The amendment includes penalties for those who employ children or adults who have been trafficked. Penalties include fine and lifetime imprisonment as well. There is a Information Technology Amendment Act of 2008 and which was amended in 2013. It includes penalties, fines and imprisonment for any person who publishes, collects, seeks and downloads child pornography in electronic form. The Narcotic Drugs and Psychotropic Substance Act is another important act which makes it illegal to cause any person, including children, to produce or deal in narcotic or psychotropic substances, and the punishment consists of fines and imprisonment. There is another important act which is a positive act, that is the Right of Children to Free and Compulsory Education Act, that is RTE. Education is free and compulsory up to the age of 14 under this Act. The Right of Children to Free and Compulsory Education Act lays out the country's commitment to provide universal access to primary education, and it focuses on children from disadvantaged social group. The RTE provides for free and compulsory education to all children aged 6 to 14. The Act prohibits denying admissions to children who lack birth certificate. It allows children to transfer schools. It requires local authorities to identify out-of-school children. It prohibits discrimination against disadvantaged groups. And it prescribes a quality educational standards. Research has shown that the disabled children who face barriers to education may be at a greater risk of working in hazardous occupations. Now, government is taking a various proactive measures towards convergence of all the schemes which are implemented by different ministries like Ministries of Human Resource Development, Women and Child Development, Urban Housing and Rural Poverty Alleviation, and Rural Development, Railway, Panchayati Raj institutions, etc. Idea is that the child labor and their families get covered under various benefits of the schemes of these ministries. Now, let us see what are the schemes and programs that the various ministries conduct. The nodal ministry is a Ministry of Women and Child Development. Its efforts include the providing food and shelter to the children who are withdrawn from work through their schemes of shelter homes. Then there is a Ministry of Human Resource Development for providing a midday meals to the school children, teachers training, supply of books, etc. And it all comes under Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan and the mainstreaming of these children into the formal education system. Then there is a convergence with the Ministries of Rural Development, Urban Housing and Poverty Alleviation and Panchayat Raj. They cover the children under their various income and employment generation schemes for their economic rehabilitation. In each state, one officer from the State Department of Labor has been nominated as an anti-human traffic unit to act as a link officer for coordinating with the Ministry of Human Resource Development in that state, and they prevent trafficking of children. CBI also happens to be the nodal anti-trafficking agency here. There is a convergence with the Ministry of Railways for generating awareness and restricting trafficking of children. Now let us see what are the rescue and repatriation measures that are undertaken by various ministries for the children who are caught under this vicious cycle of child labor. During inspection to raids, children identified are rescued. Rehabilitative measures are set forth in motion by way of repatriation. And in case of migrant child labor, and providing a bridge education becomes an important aspect of these operations, and the main objective is to mainstream them into the formal system of education. Besides, pre-vocational training is also provided to the rescued children. As regards rehabilitation, there is a educational rehabilitation which is very important, and the government is implementing a national child labor project scheme that is called NCLP in 266 child labor endemic districts. It covers 20 states, and the objectives of this scheme for the educational rehabilitation, that is NCLP scheme, are: it is the major central sector scheme for rehabilitation of child labor, and the scheme seeks to adopt a sequential approach with a focus on rehabilitation of children working in hazardous occupations and processes in the first instances. Then Under the scheme, the survey of child labor engaged in hazardous occupations and process is conducted. Then the identified children are withdrawn from these occupations and processes, and then they are put in a special schools in order to enable them to be fit for the mainstream into the formal schooling system. And there are project societies at the district level that are fully funded, and they open up special schools and rehabilitation centers for the rehabilitation of child labor. Under the scheme, children found working in hazardous occupations are withdrawn from work and put in a brisk schools, as said before, and they are also provided with a formal and non-formal education, vocational training, health care, midday meal and stipend of 150 rupees per month, and the ultimate objective would be the mainstreaming them into the formal education system. Now let us take a overall look at the institutional mechanism that exists in India for eliminating child labor. There is a national authority for elimination of child labor, and it is a high-level governmental body. It is chaired by the Ministry of Labour and Employment, and it reviews, monitors and coordinates policies, and the members represent the government agencies, employers and workers. The Secretary of the Labour and Employment chairs the Central Monitoring Committee, and it is responsible for reviewing the prevalence of child labor and monitoring the actions taken to eliminate the child labor. Then there is a National Human Rights Commission, that is NHRC, and it is charged with monitoring implementation of Bonded Labour System Abolition Act. The NHRC monitors state level action against the bonded labour. It reviews the quarterly reports by the state governments on bonded labour, and it explores and investigates various missions. The NHRC also maintains offices to monitor the progress of cases involving bonded labour and child labour that are pending with various authorities throughout the country. However, it must be said that despite the rescue and rehabilitation of bonded labourers, prosecutions have not always taken place. Then there is a Ministry of Women and Child Development, which is playing a key role, and it is charged with the coordination of anti-trafficking policies and programs for women and children. The Ministry of Home Affairs Anti-Human Traffic Cell continues to implement the government's nationwide plan to combat human trafficking by coordinating with the states to establish anti-human trafficking units. And it trains thousands of officials to combat human trafficking. There is a National Commission for the Protection of Child Rights, which investigates cases that may involve a violation of child's rights or a lack of proper implementation of laws relating to the protection and development of children, and it includes those related to child labor. The Ministry of Labour and Employment is another important department which provides oversight and coordination regarding the country's labor laws, and the state governments employ labor inspectors to enforce these laws. When the child labor prosecutions are launched, it may take years before a case is resolved because the judicial system in India, as well known, is backlogged and overburdened. Under India's federal structure, state and local police are responsible for enforcing laws pertaining to human trafficking. The Government of India has invested more than $400 million to establish a crime and criminal tracking and network systems which connects all of India's 15,000 police stations. This will enable police to better monitor trends in serious crimes, and it includes trafficking. Now let us see, are all these measures good enough? Are any more possible solutions or still can exist. Elimination of poverty, free and compulsory education, proper and strict implementation of labor laws, and abolishment of children trafficking, among others, can go a long way in solving the problem of child labor. After the 86th Amendment of the Constitution in the year 2002, the provision for free and compulsory education between the age group of 6 to 14 years has been included as a fundamental right under the Article 21A. Children, irrespective of their race, caste, sex, economic conditions, religions, place of birth, and also parents to whom they are born of, need to know how to read and write. They need a social and professional skills that only a school and nurturing environment can provide. The NGOs also have a big role to play in this regard. Various NGOs are working for the cause of child labor, and one such example is MVF in Andhra Pradesh, which is a striking example. They have been working for the welfare of children in various respects. Now, compulsory education can help eradicating the problem of child labor up to a large extent. The statistics also show that the education has helped in reducing child labor in Western countries up to a large extent. Organizing literacy and awareness program to prevent children from employment is another important step, and then there is amendment and modification into Social Security legislation which governs the child labor. Further, control on population growth to eliminate poverty is an urgent measure, and because it is the basic cause of the child labor. Then there is a mandatory requirement for industrialists for equal pay without discrimination as to the age, status and religion, etc. There is also adequate health services schemes that is needed for the children at large and who live in our own society. And there is a need to provide a training and education to the child workers during their free time.